Welcome to the Missing Ingredient Podcast with CJ Bruce, where food and beverage founders, operators, and experts share the real strategies behind building successful brands. Let's jump into today's show.
Hey, I'm CJ Bruce, and welcome to the show. This is the podcast for founders and leaders of high-impact food and beverage brands who are serious about scaling. Each episode, I sit down with the people who power the food and beverage industry. Brand operators, agencies, vendors, creators, and retailers to uncomplicate the strategies that take brands from early traction to serious scale. This episode is sponsored by The Missing Ingredient, a food and beverage marketing agency with over a decade in the industry. We take a different approach, starting with your business goals, looking at the full picture, and building a marketing strategy that actually ties back to growth. From content performance marketing to influencer partnerships and AI-powered workflows, we're an extension of your team, not just another vendor. Learn more at themissingingredient.com. Now, for today's guest, Ed Hoffman oversees global marketing for the U.S. egg industry to accelerate demand for eggs and egg products. His team runs integrated Marcom programs to reach consumers, food and beverage manufacturers, food service operators, and retailers. The American Egg Board is 100% funded by farmers producing over 90 billion eggs per year. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Thank you. It's good to see you, CJ, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you here. Okay, let's start pre-eggs. So you spent, over 25 years in food marketing with some big name agencies and your own consultancy. So I'm curious, what brought you into food and beverage or food in the first place, and what keeps you coming back?
So I kind of fell into the food industry. It was my kind of first official job out of college. And it was with a market research and consulting firm called Technomic. They specialize in the food service industry, the B2B side. And that's how I started in the industry, and I never left. I really enjoyed it. There's people got to eat, so it's relatively recession proof. There's always kind of an opportunity there. And I knew I really wanted to work on the marketing side. So after a few years of Technomic, I moved on to work at Ketchum, and from there just led to a series of jobs working in communications, and I spread across. I got out of B2B and I intentionally started working more with consumer facing and retail, and then found my way working in agriculture, and that's where I spent a majority of my time, to be honest, since about 2009. Still did some brand work here and there, but agriculture then always became, or agricultural marketing always became, it was a big part of kind of the work I was doing. And even though I've worked in this industry my entire career, I actually don't even like to cook. I love to eat out. I love to grocery shop, love farmers markets, but yeah, I am not the cook in the family here. So it's kind of a dirty secret about working in this business this long.
I like it. Getting the secrets out early.
Yeah.
That's great.
Get it all on the table.
Perfect. You also had, unique experience of working both agency and in-house, moving into the in-house, the commodity category. So can you talk a little bit about just that mindset shift where you go from, advising brands from the agency perspective to actually being the one, in-house, making the calls, and now you're working with agencies? Can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, no, and that's very true to this day. So it probably took me a year, I think, to really, completely, be very, comfortable, I guess. Comfortable is probably too strong of a word, but, to really feel like the client. Yes, we work with several different agency partners. And so I think I kind of bring a depth of kind of empathy and, acknowledgement in terms of, their world. And I think that's what makes for great client agency partnerships. So I really try to show up as the client, that I always had wanted to work with, or felt like I had a good relationship with. But, after spending so many years working in client service, working in agricultural marketing, there's a lot of similarities between that. I mean, my clients are our farmers. I mean, those are our stakeholders. And my team very much has that kind of perspective. All of us at the American Egg Board do. These are our clients. And so that kind of decades-long experience of client service, I think, it was very natural for me, on this side of the table, to apply like all those things that I learned working in client service and making sure our farmers are taken care of and they're prioritized and that we're good stewards of their money, because that's how we're funded, is by assessments from farmers. So yeah, it probably took about a year to get totally used to it, but it is great to be in that driver's seat in terms of making those decisions and greenlighting those programs that you want to do. And really enjoyed it. It's been just over 3 years since I joined.
That's great. And you just touched on it a little bit with the, what the American Egg Board actually does. So I think before we get into some specifics, it'd be helpful for, ground people, like you don't sell eggs, right? You said you're
Yeah.
representing farmers. So how do you explain at kind of the highest level, like what is the American Egg Board and what does it do?
Sure. And, commodity boards or agricultural marketing boards, that is their role, is to market the commodity. So we don't technically sell anything. Our farmers do, certainly, to retailers and customers and that. Our job, and you said it in our intro here, our job is to really grow sustained demand, and to do it as quickly as possible through a wide range of activities. I mean, I oversee all of marketing, for the organization, but we have a big investment in innovation, driving, innovation for new ideas and new uses for eggs, and even developing new egg products. There's a big export market presence that to grow internationally. So yeah, our job is to drive demand, and grow sustained demand for egg and egg products. And that's kind of the mission of what we do. So our program that I oversee, we target consumers. We have a very well-defined consumer target audience. We also have a big investment our farmers are making in channel marketing or B2B marketing. So priority CPG categories, as well as in food service. And we're really focused on the QSR and full service side of the food service industry. And we have campaigns, targeting those, product developers, executive chefs, and of course the marketing leadership, that sets strategies at CPG and food service.
Hmm. Yeah, so many different angles in there. That's
Yeah.
cool.
In these
We'll
programs, I
definitely.
should say, for both those audiences, fully integrated programs, paid, earned, shared, owned, I mean, across the board. So they all kind of center around, a very shared go-to-market strategy. And then, the fun part, all the activations and the tactics that come to support and bring that to life.
Fun. Yeah, we're definitely going to get into some of those campaigns today.
Yeah.
I think as we kind of transitioning to that part of the conversation, I think talking about penetration versus velocity, I just want to touch on this a little bit. Like I think you said over 90% of households, right, have eggs in the fridge. So how do you think about, that kind of velocity versus penetration from a marketing perspective?
Sure. So, and I always have to be very mindful about how I state the statistics to make sure my head of insights doesn't come after me. But so at any given time in the past 12 months, eggs are in 90%, almost 90% of households. So again, we don't have a penetration problem in terms of getting eggs physically into the kitchen or into the refrigerators. Our challenge is velocity, getting people to use more eggs more often. So, and that directly informs, the programs we do that directly face consumers. We have a whole new business development team in terms of doing retail partnerships, to get consumers to put eggs in a basket. And then certainly on the the B2B side of things, encouraging CPG product developers, to use eggs in, new products that you can buy at retail, or food service operators, for menus. So
Nice. Well, let's take in some campaigns. So I think because there's some really interesting stuff that you've done in this. I think one, I wanted to start with the Meant to Be Broken campaign. And so, yeah, could you just tell us a little bit about, what it is, where the idea came from? And I know, the main focus here was targeting younger consumers, right? So you
yeah.
can talk a little bit about that.
Yep. So when I first joined the Ed board, the first thing we did was to identify who is our target audience. We really needed to bring that kind of centrality to our programming, and like, what is our North Star? Well, one, let me back up. We know what our North Star is: to drive demand and to accelerate demand. But what consumer, who is this person that's going to give us that biggest opportunity? So we spent number of months, really identifying who that person is based on primary research that we've done and secondary research. And then really define, beyond just sort of demographics, but even about, from a behavioral standpoint, from a life stage standpoint, to really hone who that audience is. And then part of that was understanding what their addressable barriers are. So we're looking at consumers who are already egg customers that are probably on the like heavy side of like the light. So if you have light, medium, and heavy, it's those that are on the heavy end of the light category, if you will, and then medium users. So let me pause. Let me make sure that makes sense. So light users who do use them frequently, and then, medium users, because we feel that audience, has the greatest potential to grow. Heavy users, we're not going to walk away from them. We're still going to continue to show them the love. But heavy users probably aren't going to really eat many more eggs than they are today. And if our job is to accelerate demand, we need to find that target, that we feel has the greatest potential. Conversely, if you're a light user and maybe you just use them in baking, but you don't like the taste of eggs, you don't like the texture, I can't really help you with that. So I'm not going to really spend any resources trying to convince you to like the taste of eggs. I'm going to focus on people who are already fans. Give me more reasons to like them. And so we do have, very clear addressable barriers. I don't know what to do with them beyond breakfast. I can help you with that. I don't know how to make them taste better. We can help you with that. So that's kind of where our focus comes from. And from that, our big insight, and that ladders to sort of our organizational goals, is to get people to eat eggs outside of the familiar. We want them to rediscover eggs. We want them to break habits that they're used to and kind of think beyond kind of the expected. And that's what inspire our Meant to Be Broken. So it's our Meant to Be Broken campaign is like breaking the rules, breaking habits, breaking away from the familiar, and using eggs outside of their familiar occasions. Use them for lunch and dinner and snacking. Huge. There's so much potential for them outside of it. And by the way, we want you to use a lot of them. And so that's where the whole velocity message comes from. So, that was the whole point of the campaign, or the spirit of the campaign, rather.
Yeah, that's great. I love the, you said just identifying that kind of key segment of the market where there's the most room for growth. And then how do you, approach that and make that happen? So that's really interesting. I want to go into talking a little about the earned creator strategy.
Sure.
And so, a lot of earned creators, and this is a conversation I actually had with a mutual friend of ours, Jeff Smith from JS2 PR.
Oh, yeah.
And so curious, we do a lot with paid creators, some with earned creators. I think, many brands want to have an earned creator strategy, and how do you navigate that? How do you make that work? So can you talk a little bit about how you've approached it?
Sure. So we've worked with a range of paid influencers over the years, even before I started. Some were larger, kind of macro influencers, more kind of spokesperson celebrity level, and then some of the, kind of mid-tier, if you will. And so we'd worked with them in kind of one-off activations, and then sort of moved on to the next year or the next group. And so we had this large group of people we'd worked with in the past, and we weren't really doing anything to sort of maintain those relationships. Our farmers made an investment in that work. We should, at a minimum, maintain the relationships with them, particularly if they really performed for us, and consumers resonated with their content. So we kind of loosely formed this network of earned creators. We call them our egg ambassadors. And there's a bazillion puns here at the Egg Board, as you can imagine, with eggs, but we call them our egg ambassadors. It is an earned creator network, and the origins of it were previous paid influencers we had worked with. And it was an opt-in. We invited you to participate in this, and we were going to send you, we'll send you prompts, to encourage you, to develop content. We'll send you incentives around it, and there's opportunities, for us to further engage. So that was sort of the genesis of it. And at that point, it was just maintaining contact and sort of encouraging them, to post. And there was no real kind of rhyme or reason to that. It was just, let's just kind of get our feet wet in this space. So then we decided to make an investment in one of the influencer platforms, and actually add some more strategy around it and be far more proactive and actually recruiting earned influencers to this network. And this platform allows you to do that. We work with Tagger. That's the platform that we work with. So it allows us to identify potential influencers based on, a range of criteria, because we want to make sure that we are reaching our target audience. And so the platform allows us to do that, to actively recruit. And we've had a big initiative around recruiting earned influencers. We're at 119 right now. We've added a lot more just this year alone. We also developed a whole kind of program around it as well. So we have this big welcome gift that everyone receives, who signs on, because they do have to qualify. I mean, it's not a rigorous process. We want to make sure that they're going to be relevant, to our target. So this big welcome package that goes out to them, and there's sort of like, I don't know, tiers, for lack of a better word, that we have around influencers if they engage. So if they are becoming more and more consistent and regular influencers, when we are prompting them, there's additional surprise and delights that we'll send to them. There's opportunities for us to put paid behind their content as well. We incent everybody, to defray, some of those costs, because, these influencers are generally more on the nano micro side, and they're really trying to establish their businesses, a lot of them, and they're in kind of what they're doing. So we have kind of a whole kind of series of ways that we can, engage with them and activate them. They've been really responsive, I would say. We do about one prompt a month, and it's directly tied either into our campaign or something that's very timely. So right now we have a very huge focus organizational wide on driving consumption, moving volume. There is an oversupply of eggs in the market right now, and we are really trying to help our farmers move that with more, I think, more assertive tactics on buy that extra carton. So we have a program that's actually going on right now, and it's called Double the Eggs, and it's doubling the eggs that are typically called for in boxed like cake and brownie and pancake mixes. And the response, we just sent this out the other day. We've already have several that have already engaged, on it. So it's that kind of thing that really helps, I think, stimulate a program. And also, I think, kind of gives a sense of like how interested people are in the topic. The fact that we have a few earned creators that are already developing content on it, there's something there that's resonating. There's something there that's resonating. So, so that's how the program started. And this year we're like full speed ahead on it, because it's a very low cost, relatively speaking, way of engaging, creators that love to create food content and are big fans of eggs.
Interesting. A few follow-ups there. I'm curious you talked a little bit about the incentives, right? Incentivizing. 'Cause I think that's a question that comes up where, why are they going to post? So it seems like there's a community aspect, there's this surprise and delight aspect, there's this potential of, paid promotion behind your posts, and for smaller creators, that's getting them additional reach. Anything else in there that you feel like resonates to, get these current creators engaged?
One of the things that we have not, I'm going to say we haven't activated it, let's say, because we haven't had the need, we haven't had the opportunity yet. But one of the things that we would like to do is include them maybe in some of the other programming. So, for example, we do media partnerships with some of the larger media organizations like Hearst, for example. So why couldn't we include a few of our really, prolific, creators and invite them to come and pay for them to come and join in something that they may not normally be invited to or have as easy access to, because maybe they're just not located, in the right area. So that's another sort of opportunity, if you will. But we also don't want to turn it into something where, here are the different tiers, and if you keep posting, you can climb to this tier or this tier. There's something that feels very contrived in that, and sort of undermines the spirit of this program, which is these are people who love to post food content and are big fans of eggs, and we want to give them as much freedom to do that, and support them in any way that we can, around that. So it's not to say we might not do that, but it's, this is how new this program is. And when I talk to some of my colleagues at other boards, basically just to kind of, what are you guys doing? And what do you think about this? There's not a lot that's been done on this earned side. And maybe that's just because, earned influencers typically, as I mentioned, in our experience, have been smaller. They've been more of the kind of nano or the micro. Well, those creators are the ones that our audience loves. They prefer them because there's a sense of discovery. There's a sense of, I found this person and now I want to share it on my network. So it really makes a lot of strategic sense for us. And again, and it's performing, the earned influencers that we're working with, it's performing. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Listen, we could have this call in another month and something could have changed, but right now, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it's great. I appreciate you going into the detail on that. I think it's, we've also seen like the micro nano, more engagement there and the collaboration there and response from audiences makes a lot of sense. And I think it's interesting to just hear the nuanced approach. It's like finding that balance of, incentivizing enough to do things, but not so much that it feels contrived, like you said. So,
and you just touched on something that is really important for our program around engagement, versus necessarily awareness. And I think we are fortunate because, we're in 90% of homes and eggs are pretty indispensable in people's lives. Even when prices were really high a year ago, people were still buying eggs. I mean, demand didn't really dip down too significantly because they are so indispensable. They are so, part of people's lives. And we're very mindful of that and, grateful for that. And we want to make sure that we're meeting the moment, when those moments arrive. But I think the other thing too of that size is, so we don't have an awareness problem. There's a lot of egg content out there and we are constantly looking at it. We are constantly trying to do like opportunistic boosting for some content that might be trending. And we're very fortunate to be in that spot. We don't really have an awareness problem around eggs, but the engagement piece is really the sign of content resonating, stories resonating, and nano and micro influencers are just perfect for that. There's just they're a great group of creators to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, I want to shift into another campaign that was, out of the box, which is Roblox.
Yeah.
So Tower of Egg on Roblox. I think I love the idea of a Roblox game. And so I want to know about the campaign itself. And I'm also curious about, pitching a Roblox game to a bunch of farmers and agriculture people. Like, how did that come about?
Well, I think a couple of things. So one, the immersive media or gaming, but we try to refer to more as immersive media because that's really kind of what we're bringing to the table here, is very much part of the Meant to Be Broken campaign. It is not a standalone program. It is very much in the spirit of that campaign, which is, inspiring consumers to use eggs in different ways. And I think what's so amazing about the immersive media experience and the Tower of Eggs that we did, which was an obstacle course, like a 4-level obstacle course, and each level was a different kind of recipe you had to create, which was unexpected and not familiar. And as the higher, the more levels you went, the more difficult, the game becomes. And so it was very much on strategy with what we were doing. It was an unapologetic test and learn type of activation. It was new for us. And frankly, it's new for the gaming space for a commodity board or, to be engaged in that way. There are some food brands that certainly are in there, but so that was sort of a test and learn about this. This makes strategic sense. Our target audience, I didn't tell you, we call them explorers. Again, lots of puns around here, but our target audience, gaming influencers over-index for both men and women in our target and are the highest activity, that for influencer engagement. So, and that really resonated with us as a team. So if our audience, the number one kind of influencer that they're really looking at are gamers, why aren't we in gaming? Because they clearly have an interest there. That's why this makes sense. So when you talk about how do I sell this into, farmers, or how do I pitch this to farmers, is that all has to go back to our insights and research. And that this is what our insight says. This is what our research says. This is how this connects. And I would argue, after actually making food in your own kitchen, doing it digitally in an immersive and media experience is pretty darn close to, actually making the product itself. And of course, you're hoping you can connect somebody to think, I'm going to make this or make something like this, taking away from the game. It was the most successful from a performance metrics, awareness, and engagement activation in our entire campaign when we launched. People were spending up to 6 minutes in this game, which
Wow.
is huge. I mean, I am admittedly not a gamer, but everything that I have learned about that space up to 6 minutes, is huge. So we worked with a partner called Coop Ventures. They're sort of the intermediary between us and Super League, and we've worked with them now twice. We also continued Tower of Eggs last year, and we're looking at doing something different with them this year. But clearly, I mean, the space is relevant for our audience, and so that's why, we leaned in on that type of activation.
That's great. There's a couple things I wanted to follow up in there. One, going back to just overall research, and I'm curious, I guess, how you've approached that research, doing, surveys, working with research partners, access to research tools, or just, maybe start there. Just how do you think about how does the research actually happen?
So this is all what I mentioned, that we developed this very well-defined target audience when I first started. There were several different inputs. One was primary research that we had conducted over the years. The American Egg Board. Our farmers make a huge investment in original research, which is huge for a commodity board, and let alone to have a team on staff to kind of measure is actually kind of unusual in my experience anyway. So we had that input. Then we also have a lot of secondary and syndicated research that is relevant to the category. Throw that in. Our main agency partner, Ketchum, using their Omnicom earned ID tech stack, that opens up a wide range of possibilities to better understand who this target audience is. And this starts filling in the gaps in terms of interest, some of the psychographic types of things. What do they like? What do they don't like? Where do they eat? What kind of media their consumption is? That whole profile, kind of round that piece of it out. So a lot of that came from the compilation of all of this together, all of this research together. And then we spent, the next kind of 6 months, I would say, we had some studies that were already planned. And so we sort of built that plane a little bit while we were flying it. So we were pressure testing our target. Like, let's put a stake in the ground based on what we know today, and then let's move forward. And, let's not let perfection, get in the way of good enough. And I think in this world about how quickly marketing changes, I think you need to be constantly building the plane as you are flying it, and you need to often test and learn. And, again, not just throwing stuff up against the wall. I mean, it has to be informed with strategy and sort of a rationale. But and that's what we did. And we test and learned as we went, and we refined this target, but felt really good about where we were at after a year of doing that. And now any research study that we do, if it's not just focused on our target, we always oversample, to make sure that we're capturing, research findings and insights, for our target to inform that program.
Got it.
Yeah. Does that answer your question about kind of where that came from for it? Okay.
I think digging in, it's an interesting space, because I think that there's often, at least we've experienced, resistance to research in certain ways, or certain, clients, or depending on the stage of the business, and like what depth do you go, and where do you get, what are the sources, how you synthesize all that information. So I think it's helpful to have some of that context. The next thing I was going to ask, you touched a little bit on, on performance throughout all these pieces, and like it performed well or didn't perform well. So can you tell us a little bit more about, KPIs and how you're measuring performance across these different activities? We know the overall goal, right? Increasing like velocity, increasing consumption of eggs. So I'm sure there's something there that's more of a lagging indicator. But as you're in these campaigns, what are some of the things that you're looking for to measure success?
The marketing program, marketing and comms programs, these campaign metrics really come down to generally like awareness, engagement, and some of those more familiar, KPIs, where we can actually measure in real time to understand if these programs are performing, and if not, make changes, optimize, as we go. However, they're all feeding into kind of our overall, business outcomes. And our organization, we have 12 different overall outcomes. And some of the ones marketing feeds directly into and probably leads when you talk about shifting perceptions. And some we may not be as, directly, touching per se, but the ones that we're really feeding into is to increase demand. And we actually look at it from a per cap standpoint. and we certainly contribute to that along with, other work streams here. But when you talk about perceptions shifting, when you talk about, people's association with eggs as healthy, that really falls in the marketing and comms space. So what we do in order to better understand that, if you think about, measurement from sort of like a, I don't know, pyramid or a chevron, depending on which way you want to think about the progression here, is you're really looking at what are your tactical measures to make sure that you are achieving those. And then from there, we start looking at lift studies, sales lift studies, and perception lift studies. Again, working with our agency partner to understand how our programs directionally perform from driving sales. So it's not an actual sales number per se, but it's a directional sense that, we are moving the needle on from a sales standpoint and from a perception standpoint. Because our ultimate business impact then is, did we move people's perceptions? Do we think that people believe eggs to be more healthy, or a greater preference? And those will ultimately sustain increased demand. So it is a layered approach, but tactically, we really look at, the engagement and awareness kinds of numbers, when we're looking at our programs. We get into like retail partnerships. We actually might look at volume moved. And we recently finished a 2-month campaign working with Instacart, which was very much about moving volume, because that's kind of the world we're living in right now, is because of our oversupply. And we did make an impact moving volume, units as well as dollar sales. But what I found most compelling for us from a marketing standpoint was 20% of the volume and sales that moved came from shoppers that were new to the category on Instacart. And that's pretty compelling when you talk about impact.
Yeah.
Now, new is defined not just as I'm totally new and I've never bought eggs from Instacart, or I haven't bought in at least 6 months. So those are compelling, from an impact standpoint. But that's really what we're trying to do is, again, we're trying to grow sustained demand, for eggs. And ultimately, you look at perceptions. What can I control? To educate, change behavior, improve perceptions of eggs.
Yeah, that's great. Appreciate you going to the detail on that. So I want to shift gears. A few other questions to dig in. So one, just taking a wider view on some favorite food brands. What are some of the favorite food and beverage brands you've got that you think deserve some more attention?
Well, admittedly, I had to say, like, as I was telling you before we got started here, this is like the one question I really probably had to give the most thought to, because I don't think about it as often. But, for me right now, and this is not a big insight because I think this is a lot of what people are looking at, are food brands that are really delivering on protein claims, because everything has protein in it now for whatever reasons. Is it just hopping on the bandwagon? Is it because, you're taking a GLP-1? Is it, you're more into fitness? So I think that I find there's a lot of media coverage around brands that are doing exciting things with protein and delivering. So Simply Fuel is a protein ball. I'm actually a customer of that as well. So I'm not just following it, but it was created by Mitzi Dulon, who is a registered dietitian. And she's worked with a lot of like major athletic organizations. I want to say Kansas City. But and she developed these. It's a great story. She developed these kind of high protein snack balls that have like a sweet flavor to them for her athletes, because they wanted something sweet, but you still have to, keep that sort of, health focus to some extent. And it's just blown up. You can buy them, on Amazon, major grocery stores. I think she's in Costco now. So I think that's a really exciting story. You're delivering on protein, you're delivering on flavor, you're delivering on convenience. It's a good price point. And I think it has been an incredibly great success story for her because it's largely grassroots. There's no big ad campaign. There's no big that. So that's exciting. I also think what's really interesting now, again, in the protein space, is what cottage cheese brands are doing. I mean, grandma's old dusty cottage cheese with like the cling peaches and heavy syrup, whatever. And cottage cheese is everywhere now. And certainly, you see a lot of mashups with eggs and cottage cheese. But I think what these brands and Daisy, I believe it's Daisy, launched a new campaign earlier this year to really shake off that image of what cottage cheese, perceptions that people may have, to really make it relevant for today's consumer. And how just how versatile it is, whether it is you just legit enjoy eating cottage cheese with fruit or what have you, or how it serves a real important role in different recipes, and, boost protein content in a way that is, really enhances, different recipes. So I don't know, Simply Fuel and Daisy cottage cheese.
That's great.
Those are my favorites right now. Again, we could talk in a month and I could have moved on, but that's where I'm at.
That's great. Yeah, we'll get a part 2 at some point and check back in on the.
Notice how I'm
favorites
selling that
evolve.
into you right now. My subliminal to be invited back.
Yeah, I love it. So another question that I've been asking pretty much every guest is around AI, and so obviously AI is having an impact on basically the entire economy. So curious about from a marketing perspective, the commodity board. Also ways consumers are interacting with AI tools and all of that. So just broadly, how do you feel it's changing the work that you do, and how are you approaching that with your day to day?
So we have 2 different initiatives right now that we had started, a good 18 months ago, 2024. So the first thing that we did is, I mentioned our Explore, our consumer target audience, that we, really made, an investment in building. So we have a synthetic version of this target audience. She is our marketing AI assistant, or Maya, is what we call her. And again, we did this in partnership with Ketchum. And this was a great example of a test and learn. We were one of the first clients they've worked with to do this. And it's like, let's build it and see, what the possibilities are. And so we spent last year building and training her and getting to a point with a high level of confidence that what we were feeding into her, the prompts we were giving her, we were getting back responses that we felt good about, and that we felt that we could really trust. So we use her a lot right now to test like program ideas, to test creative we run by, to answer questions about different ideas that we may want to, we're considering from a programming standpoint, identify potential influencers. And right now, I think we're still getting used to using her, and I find myself asking my team often, like, did you check with Maya? Like, run it by Maya and see. And, some of the things that have come back have been like really, interesting, the response, and some are pretty brutal. I mean, like, no, I would never do that. I would not resonate, and so the personality kind of comes through, but it has been incredibly helpful. Going back to the Roblox example, our, oh my gosh, forgetting the name of it. It's the avatar that sort of like, come play the Tower of Eggs game that's actually in the game. And we were creating it. We needed to create one last year. The first year we used one of the spokespeople we were working with, agreed to be represented in the game, but that was only for that first year. So we created this last year and we're like, let's run it by Maya. And Maya said, I love it, but put a tattoo on its arm. I think that would find it more appealing. We're like, it was amazing, that they so that she has like a fried egg in a pan now on the avatar's arm, which is great. So, I mean, that's kind of, it feels a little gimmicky, but if it's going to resonate more, make that avatar more appealing or more interesting or more believable. So there's that. I think there's 100% potential that we would start using this to maybe develop social content, not just pressure test social content. So I think that there's certainly room for that. I think that we are using it certainly from, just kind of creative concepting, even, to help, bring ideas to life, or what have you. So we're using that quite a bit. And this is just the beginning. My insights team, he and I are actually working on some things about, well, what are other ways to bring AI from a more enterprise level? Like our innovation team, for example, we should absolutely have proxies for what is the typical QSR coffee customer, so we can start pressure testing innovation ideas or innovation concepts. So there is a lot more to come, I think, on that front for us to use it. The other one is GEO, or generative engine optimization, and how important that is now becoming. I mean, we kind of refer to AI as an audience. Like, what are we doing to make sure that we are, on the topics or themes that we want to be or feel we should be the authority, that we are surfacing, being recognized as the authority, that the sentiment around it is positive. So we conducted several audits last year on that, and now we sort of have that process in place. We are putting in all the best practices in terms of revamping content that's on our website, all of our FAQs, anything that's new that's being written, to just feed into, these are the areas, these are the themes: egg nutrition, hen housing systems, animal welfare, those kinds of things where it's important for us to be the authority. We want to make sure that we're showing up. So how do we continue to feed the AI beast to make sure that that's happening? Earned media is a great opportunity for that, and has really, I think, kind of reasserted its not prominence, but I think it's making it even more relevant that we are securing excellent earned media coverage, because that's one of the top sources that AI searching at. Reddit, we are wading our way into Reddit this year because, again, that is kind of inexplicably one of the top areas, these community forums. But we're not gonna fight it. It's not if we're gonna get in the game, but it's like, well, how do we get in the game in a way that is meaningful for that community and not just jumping in. So those are two big areas how we are leveraging AI. And I think it's only going to, really continue. There's a lot of upside of how things could be, used, not just, well, I guess from a marketing standpoint, but even from, how my team sort of, shows up, or uses AI. I think there's a great opportunity to help us better understand our target audience beyond this sort of monolith that we have right now. But, our target is like 18 to 34. Well, people who are 18 to 22 are a hell of a lot different than people who are 30 and 34. We have to be talking about them more relevantly, more personalized, not just in our programming or our channels, but our creative, our language, like how we're actually speaking with them. So huge potential for that. And I think we're starting to move in that direction just this year. And I think AI will be, super helpful for us with that, to help kind of hone what that story is.
Those are such great examples, and I definitely you've just solidified your round 2 interview, because I want to dig deeper into all of those AI pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we've got to wrap up here, so I have one last question. Before I get to that, I want to make sure I point people to your website, so incredibleegg.org.
Yep.
And then, is there anywhere else you'd recommend that people learn about you or the work that you're doing?
The work that we're doing, we know incredibleegg.org is great if you're interested in learning more about the two different consumer campaigns. Are meant-to-be-broken.org. That's all about, thinking about eggs differently, in food, what have you. And then we didn't really touch on our nutrition, but we have the first ever egg nutrition campaign we launched last summer. It's strongerbythedozen.org. And that's about really elevating kind of strong bodies, strong minds, which are two very relevant topics right now when it comes to people's just well-being. And eggs have the protein and eggs have the choline, and that helps, feed the strong body, strong mind positioning we have. So those two. And of course, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Pinterest. All incredibleegg.org.
Incredibleegg.org. So our last question I wanted to get into, we didn't touch on this either, but you've talked about how mentoring is really important to you, and kind of having that, being a mentor. And I'm curious if there, advice that you got or a mentor that you had, earlier in your career or throughout your career, that, still guides how you operate today.
It is a big part of kind of what I enjoy, certainly from a team standpoint, but I've also I have taught at California State University at Northridge, and as well. So even just that from a student standpoint, I think that, I would tell my students this, I still tell my teams this, and I still firmly believe in this. My very first boss gave me this advice, and it's so resonant, which is no one is going to ever look out for your career more than you. It's not your boss's job. Your boss's job is there to coach and advocate for you, but no one is going to look out for your career more than you. So speak up if you want to try something, if you want to do something, raise your hand and volunteer to do that. And it's something that has really, frankly, guided me my entire career. It's something that I still tell, like I said, I still tell students when I'm teaching students or I lecture at different universities. My nieces, three of them, two of them are in college and two of them are out. And I remember telling them, that. And it's, even myself at this point in my career, we still think about that. Like, if you don't ask, what's the worst that's going to happen? Somebody could say no, but be your advocate, be your advocate.
That's awesome. All right. We've been talking to Ed Hoffman, Vice President of Marketing and Communications at American Egg Board. Be sure to check them out at incredibleegg.org. Ed, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, you bet, CJ. Good to see you. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Missing Ingredient podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.